All right, so to give continuation to the studies of the medium's book, chapter 28, Charlatanism and Trickery. We read last week item 204, but since it's the very beginning of the chapter, I think it's wise just read again,
Okay.
And then we continue to 305.
Okay. Charlatanism and Trickery, Mediums for Hire, 304. Since anything can be exploited, it is no wonder that there are persons who want to exploit spirits. It remains to know how spirits would take it if such an attempt were made on them. We may state from the start that nothing lends itself better to charlatanism and trickery than such an occupation. Since there are many more fake mediums than somnambulists, this simple fact in itself is a basis for distrust. On the other hand, unprofitableness is the best response to those who only see the phenomenon as clever tricks. There is no such thing as non-profit charlatanism. What reason would persons have for practicing deceit without profit, especially if their recognized trustworthiness places them above suspicion? If mediums' use of their faculty for monetary gain raises suspicions about mediums in general, it does not prove that such suspicions have any foundation. They may truly have the faculty and still act in good faith, although expecting to get paid. In that case, let us see if it is possible to expect a satisfactory result.
Thanks. Okay, so with the issue of exploitation, it seems to me, and as a personal observation, okay, that the explanation seems to come from group of individuals who have low moral values, but have greater intellectual values over those individuals or group of individuals with lesser intellectual values that could be fooled, so to say, by those who seek to exploit. Now, those low intellectual values may be expressed in different ways. Just a lack of knowledge, those are not have an opportunity to learn things, or individuals way too fixated on untruthful dogmas, or being completely radicalized. Because once you allow yourself to become a radical, you almost concede your own ability to reason, and you become a little toy at those things or those values to which you are radical toward. So in the issue, and I'm bringing that upon because the issue of charlatanism and trickery, of course, those who practice, who do active action in the subject, are guilty of what they are doing, or responsible for what they are doing. But aren't those, and that's my point here, who become victimized by those wise guys out there, carry a responsibility of their own to become such an easy target of those individuals. So every time that we see, perhaps not every time, I shouldn't say every time, but every often when we see individuals being fooled, become a little puppets of individuals or group of individuals, lead them to think in one way or another, don't they carry a degree of responsibility of their own for not seeking to educate themselves, for not seeking to get out of the box where they place themselves, for not being able to utilize our most precious attribute, which is our intelligence, is what separates us from the rest of the animalia. So since everything can be exploited, it's no wonder that there are spirits who wants to exploit, and there are persons who wants to exploit spirits. But we could reverse that also and say, since anything can be exploited, it's no wonder there are spirits who wants to exploit persons. The two can take place. And the issue of mediums to hires, I think is important that we say that again. We said last week, I'm going to repeat, last month, I'm going to repeat, that we're not really here accusing anyone of anything. We are not judging, we are stating facts. Kardec is bringing a point of here of what are the risks of using mediumship as a profession, as a means of making a living. And we are here following the recommendations of Kardec and following the recommendations of the spirits of truth, and in our case, on how to safely use mediumship and how to safely use mediumship with the objective of learning and in the practice of charity. In the practice of charity, one perhaps the most important thing that we can do is passing along the teachings that we receive from the spirits through mediums. Now, if we're going to pass anything along, we hope to be the truth. You hope to be of true value to those who pass those things along. And that demands from us to educate ourselves, to not become a target, to not become subject of charlatanism and trickery. And that is the reason I believe Kardec places this here. And he needs to separate when he says over here, if mediums use their faculty for monetary gain, it raises suspicions about all mediums in general. And by that can say that it makes suspicious on the doctrine that was made through mediumship. And why not charge? And that's what's going to read in the start. This specific part of the chapter is exactly that. Because once I make my living through mediumship, and I am a true medium, and I do indeed have the faculty, I still need the one who will pass the message. Because in reality, I am not doing the work. I am being an intermediary. I'm being the tool to which the Spirit will give a message. Do I have the right to charge? It becomes very complicated in a society that believes that anything that expends time, one should charge for it. Time is money, therefore, if I use my time doing anything, I should be charging for it. Does it hold true? Or are there rewards that cannot be measured with a dollar sign? Are there rewards that cannot be quantified, but only qualified? And if my means of paying my bills, paying my rent is through mediumship, and the spirits does not show up, what am I going to do? Well, how am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to pay my bills? Am I honest enough to say, well, this whole month I didn't get anything at all from the spirits, I cannot pass any message along? Or I will have to make something else so I can pay for my rent, so I can pay for my bills? It raises the suspicions. And it's factual. Now, again, we are not saying here that a medium who perhaps deceived someone or individual who used the mediumship to make money is not a medium. And not say that true medium may also use charlatanism, because as that said, just because there are false wine doesn't mean that does not have, we do not have real wine. Just because there is false emerald does not mean that there is not true, real emerald. So the thing needs to live together, and you have to learn how to separate one on another. And one of the means of make that separation is to avoid those who are charging, because they do open room for suspicion, they open room for questions. All right? You can read 305 and then you can comment.
Okay. 305. If someone has really understood what we have stated about the conditions required to serve as interpreters for good spirits, the multiple causes that can repel them, the circumstances which, apart from the spirit's will, might be obstacles to their manifestation, and finally, all the conditions of a moral nature that could influence communications, how could he or she believe that a spirit, even if it is of the lowest order, would at all times be under the orders of paid mediums and be subject to their demands to answer the curiosity of the first inquisitor who came along? If we understand the aversion good spirits hold for anything that has the spell of avarice, selfishness about it, and the little importance they attach to material matters, how could we possibly believe that they would help those who intend to make a business of their manifestations? The idea is repugnant to reason, and we would have to know next to nothing about the nature of the spirit world to accept such a thing. However, since frivolous spirits are less scrupulous and look for occasions to amuse themselves at our expense, it might be that if we are not fooled by a fake medium, it is still quite possible to be fooled by some of these spirits. These simple considerations provide us with a measure of confidence to be given to these types of communication. But why resort to paid mediums nowadays if the faculty may be found among family members, friends, and acquaintances at no cost, if we ourselves do not possess it?
And so here, what Kazakh is trying to tell us is the differentiation of good mediums from mediums. He states here, if someone really understood what we have stated about the conditions required to serve as interpreter to good mediums, not to mediums, but to good mediums, the multiple causes that can repel them, the circumstances which, apart from the spirit's will, might be an obstacle for the manifestations, and finally, all the conditions of moral nature can influence the communications. Kardec and Erasmus in this book tells us that the only reason that the spirits of truth brought about this doctrine and use mediumship, the only single objective is to elevate us morally, to bring upgrade humankind morally. So anything that deviates from that objective in itself raises suspicions. Now, throughout, especially the books, psychographies of Chico Xavier, have brought some informations of intellectual, of material things. You know, the understand of the pituitary, of the hypophysis gland or pineal gland, some of the stuff, some of the revelations of material things, but what the objective was not the material things in itself. The objective was to elevate us morally. And in order to bring up that point, they have to use some revelations, but that was not the objective. It's important that we separate things. The objective, the final goal, is to upgrade us morally. So anything that goes away from this goal of teaching us to be morally correct, teaching us to live in accordance to divine laws that we are now studying in the Medium's book, it already raises a degree of suspicion of the spirits providing those messages, not necessarily the mediums. Okay? But then we go into why are those spirits using those mediums? What established the relationship of those two individuals, of those two spirits, one incarnate and one discarnate? Are those mediums open rooms, opportunities for less evolved spirits to bring about their own messages for their own personal reasons? So through the quality of the messages themselves, we can, as we have studied this already, have a reasonable possibility of qualifying, so to say, the spirits through those messages. Again, a good tree will bear good fruits, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruits. So we have to break down the message, understand the message, and we have a good idea of who is giving those messages. And indirectly, we can also say who is being the instrument used to deliver those messages, the mediums in this case. And Kardec says, if you understand the aversion good spirits hold from anything that smells of avarice and selfishness about it, and the little importance they attach to material matters, how could we possibly believe that they would help those who intend to make business of their manifestations? The spirits are busy. They have things to do. They volunteer, so to say, to help us to elevate it morally, and they will do so out of their goodwill. But once they see that the objective is other than upgrade us morally, the good spirits will move away from it. But a space is never left empty, and will be occupied by something else. We say over here that perhaps someone seeking an information have the merit to receive that information, and will use a medium to receive that information, and that may happen. But that is once in a million times, because the good spirits, even though we are seeking something of goodness of our heart, don't really care really for material things. That's right over here, not interested in things of material matter. And they will perhaps concede to it when the objective is to bring about a moral elevation of that individual or a group completely. So that is what we could call the perfect marriage, right? Frivolous spirits are less scrupulous and look for occasions to amuse themselves at our expense. It might be that if you are not fooled by a fake medium, it's still quite possible to be fooled by some of these spirits. So, two kinds of charlatanism here. One, fake medium. Boom, that's easy, right? someone who pretends to be a medium and speak out of his own mind. That is not a third party at all. Or there is a third party there. There is a spirit, which use an uneducated medium to fool. So whoever's used those mediums. There we could say there is the perfect melody right there, right? The one seeking personal gain finds the spirit was also seeking personal gain. The two will have an association, an affinity, and us, for not educating ourselves, we become target of two spirits, one incarnate, one discarnate, who seeks to use our ignorance for their own profit. Is that always the case? Again, I'm going to go back to that. Maybe not always the case, but raises a high degree of suspicion. And it's up to us to educate ourselves. Comments?
Yeah, this is a very complex, difficult subject, especially in this country, right, where we have where it's mediumship, paid mediumship is common and widespread, right? We have a whole city, a whole town here in New York State that devotes itself to mediumship, to mediums, where they receive payment, and a lot of good work is done there. And we have also some mediums that receive communications and publish books, and a whole literature based on books by supposed elevated spirits, right? We have two mediums that have published extensive publications claiming that it was Jesus, that it is Jesus that bring the communication. And I had the opportunity of reading some of the communications, and it's interesting because the communication itself, it doesn't look deceiving, it doesn't look harmful. It just looks, it's shallow, right? And so people that are reading this and are following this, and they really believe that, they don't understand the full concept of how mediumship works and how, the whole spirit scale works, right? That Jesus wouldn't come himself to give the communications. He would use spirits in order for those spirits to also to work. So what type of spirit is doing this communication and using the name of Jesus if they are not really causing any ostensive harm, right? Because you are causing harm. You could see, if you go the classification of the spirits, I'm almost sure it's pseudo-wise spirits, right? You have the spirits that think that they know more than they do, and they think that they can educate. And we have incarnates that do that also, right? That come and brings what they think is it's knowledge, and in the end, it's really not much. So it's very complex. I think that Kardec at that time, when mediumship here was starting, he presented as more or less of a black and white. Not really, but meaning you have either fake mediums or you have deceiving spirits, and it would be very easy to discern between them, to separate them. And I think it's a little bit more complex than that. And we've been seeing this since the publication of Kardec. We have, in Brazil nowadays, we have many so-called spiritist work that when you read, you find nothing. And all of these mediums that I was thinking of the case of Eusapia Palladino, one of the most famous mediums in the beginning of the 20th century, that was explored, prodded, and everything by the scientists, that at a certain point she started faking the mediumship because she was tired of the abuse. So even, a very gifted medium can fake for different reasons, right? You have the photos, the exposition of photography of the spiritual world. There is a lot of fakery there and a lot of good pictures. So I think the subject, since Kardec published the Mediums book, became so much more complex, and it's very hard for us to discuss it and to really to separate. But I think that for if you are in doubt on where to look for, the basis will be remembering what Kardec said: discard 10 truths before accepting one lie. The charging is a big red flag, because even if it's true, if it's true, it will come later through other means. And be trust the go to trustable sources, right? And if something comes from someone you never heard of and you have no idea if it's true or not, put it aside and wait, because otherwise it's very easy to get caught into the possibility of fraud and everything. Again, we're not saying not to read, because we should use our reason to analyze, but in doubt, put it aside, right? It's a difficult subject.
Yeah, and again, we are not really accusing anyone here. We don't have the base for that. We are simply using the reasoning that Kardec brings to us, that the good spirits bring to us, on safety, how to protect ourselves from a possible charlatanism, a possible trickery, a possible deceiving spirits, possible deceiving mediums. And one of the ways that we can do that is to avoid making use of paid mediums. Now, it is extremely difficult, because for those who are spiritualists and are convinced two things. One, all message comes from good spirits. That's an extremely dangerous and big problem right then and there. There are those spiritualists who believe that if spirits give a communication, by default is a good spirit. It's extremely dangerous. And that by itself makes, at least personally, avoid paid mediums. Avoid spiritualists who believe that all communications, by the fact they come from the spiritual world, come from good spirits. Extremely dangerous to me. And then Kardec put something in over here when he asked, why resort to paid meals nowadays if the factor may be found amongst family members, friends, and acquaintances at no cost, if we ourselves do not possess it? That's the one that I think is a little bit more complicated. I don't think that many people have access to a medium. I don't think that, I believe there are a lot more mediums out there who don't even know that they have, that possess this attribute, or those who possess it and will completely shut it down out of taboo, out of dogmas, out of fears of not being socially accepted and all kinds of things. So encountering available mediums may be not that easy. And then encounter educated mediums in accordance with the objectives of this doctrine may become even more difficult, which put things in an even more difficult situation, as Ron is saying, that some people may not have access to what we are considering over here of being reliable mediums and reliable mediumship. which places in ourselves the need of being even more educated. And through being even more educated, I think, and I'm personal here, we're going to come to the conclusion that we don't need mediums really. In very rare situations that I think that that would be useful to resource to a medium. I think most of the time in our lives, there's no need for such a thing. Because as John said, if there is a valuable message that we should receive that would help us elevate ourselves morally, and even in the circumstances, the good spirits will find a way to bring it to us. It will come to us one way or another. Again, if you are open to receive it, right? If you're open to listen, I think very often we are bombarded with good news, but we are only pay attention to the bad news. Okay? 306.
Okay. 306. Mediums for hire are not only those who ask for payment. Such self-interest does not always appear as ambition for material profit, but also as a pretense of any kind that may support personal desires. This is one of the weaknesses that mocking spirits know very well how to exploit, skillfully and astutely taking advantage of it, and luring those who fall under the influence into deceptive illusion. In some, mediumship is granted for practicing the good, and the good spirits withdraw from anyone who intends to transform it into means of reaching anything contrary to designs of providence. Selfishness is the scourge of society, and good spirits strive against it constantly. Therefore, one should never suppose that spirits would ever want to aid it. This is so reasonable that it would be needless to insist on the matter.
Thanks.
Mhm.
So I think this part is even more important, more relevant nowadays, and extremely relevant in the exercise of mediumship in spiritism, not only spiritualism, but in spiritism. Okay, which is mediums seeking to gain self-interest outside of monetary gains. Not talking about getting paid here, no. Not talking about receiving advantages money-wise. But with all the different kinds of ambitions, seeking to gain social status, seeking to gain superiority in a group, seeking to elevate themselves as almost in a competitive way. I'm a better medium than others because A, B, and C. Being guided more by vanity, more by pride than through the true objective of educating oneself and passing this education to others in the exercise of charity. And here the risk of what I call the perfect marriage is even bigger, because if I'm full of pride, if I'm full of egotism, if I have this very high narcissism, what is the chance that there are spirits in the spiritual world right now with the same vices that I have, which are not that uncommon. If I seek fame, recognition, to have my name on billboards throughout the city, how many discarnate spirits are there right now with the same kind of goals and objectives? And when a medium with these goals open themselves to receive anyone who have such common goals, it's a perfect marriage, and it can happen quite easily if that is one of the vices, one of the problems that we have today in our society. Selfishness is the scourge of society. So it's rather common, right? So, and in the spirituals, so let's say the medium does understand that making money out of the mediumship is not a good idea, reasons on it, agrees with it, does not practice mediumship for financial gain, but is that medium really free of that pride and selfishness, is really free of that narcissism that eliminates the desire to have a recognition, to have their name recognized, to the point that they will use their mediumship with sole object of learning and pass that learning of moral values along, or are the mediums in the spirituals also at risk of in a flash moment of invigilance, open rooms to spirits that will target that narcissism, that target that pride, that pleasure of recognition, and use that medium for their own pride and narcissism. I think that's what João alerted a few minutes ago, that we need to be extremely careful, and it's happening in spiritism, and puts us in an even higher need of vigilance. And not saying here, don't read such and such things. I would never say that personally. I do say that we have a very vast literature of tested mediums and spirits available to us. If you would be able to finish up some, I could easily say 500 books. Only from Chico Xavier, you have almost 500 and 400 something. Easily could say books that are tested and completely safe for us to read, some 500 of them, while you do resource to others. You can, and perhaps even should, but you have to have that degree of vigilance when read those other books. We had seen even among us mediums who start doing absolutely amazing work become somewhat fascinated, open themselves to become target by spirits with less noble objectives. And again, the spirits not going to use a medium who is contrary to those books. There is something about those mediums, and all of us, pride and selfishness is something that we are all here fight against. And it just open that window of opportunity a little bit. It only takes to put a little bit of pride or the selfishness above other things for those spirits to make use of it. So more and more, we need to be extremely vigilant as the doctrine gains more popularity, so to say, You have to make sure that it becomes popular but not populist. It becomes something falling in vulgarity. We complain, I do, that sometimes some of those books are extremely hard to read, so difficult. But it's in that exactly that you find a value. You educate yourself in it. When we start to simplify something that is not simple, you open the risk to bring errors. If a subject is complex, it is complex. You can't make it simple if it's complex. And it's up to us to elevate ourselves to be able to decide, to understand those complex topics. If you try to make it extremely simple for everyone to understand, chances are that something is wrong. And there are books out there that it's just simply a degree of vulgarity, even in the quality of the writing, that at least opens a big red flag for suspicion. And when you go a little bit on it, it doesn't really need to go a little deep on it because there's no depth to begin with. You see that it's wrong, that it's bad, that it's of no value, that it's empty. And it often will come because we, incarnated mediums, allow our vanity, allow our pride to overtake the objective of the mediumship in itself, even if for a little instant. And the spirits who are waiting for their opportunity will not miss it. Comments?
Yeah, it's always complex again, the subject, right? Because we're dealing here with invisible things, right? So when we talk about the communications and even the books, right? You read some of them, and what I said about those communications from supposedly from Jesus here, right? You read them, and there's nothing really that sharp that is clearly wrong or deceiving or anything. It's just very shallow suggestions and guidances, and be good and life will be good. Right? These types of things. So it's hard. If you really, if you don't study, it's hard. And again, if you take a book, a spiritist book, which is much harder to study and to understand, and you take those easy books to read, it give you much more pleasure, let's say, in a sense, to read because they are easier to read. It can be, it can be an issue, right? And I think we are trying here to call the attention of what choices are we going to make, right? If we are going to, in the end, it's an individual choices that we are going to make. We are going to choose what we're going to read or study. So what we can do is just to call the attention of what is out there, and what is what we should be careful and what not, right? So, but again, it's not easy.
Again, I spoke things that are hard, that are complex, for their own nature, and you cannot simplify it. You cannot simplify astrophysics. You cannot make astrophysics for idiots. It doesn't work. You have the gospel of Jesus through the disciples, to the evangelists. We're still trying to understand it, the words of Christ. There are people spending their lives trying to understand one sentence. Emmanuel brings one sentence, sometimes not even a full sentence of one of the words of the statements of Christ, and bring about a whole chapter about it. How could you expect, how could you believe that somebody would have a psychography from Jesus, that it's easy, that it's shallow, that is an easy reading? It can't be an easy reading. A perfect spirit, the complexity of a perfect spirit, it's not easy, should not be easy. It's a big red flag right then and there. Joana de Angelis told Devout Frank, no, I cannot make my books less difficult, easy. The subject's not easy. And our position here is educator, and an educator elevates their students, bring them up. The educator does not lower to themselves to their level. Would Jesus lower himself to our level, or try to bring us up to his level? And when I think in the beginning of this chapter, I said last month that at the time of Kardec, and you can see here now that it's not at the time of Kardec, it's now, it's present. Perhaps even more relevant now. And we will be present, or will be relevant for as long as we need to propagate ourselves morally. Once you read that level, then you don't need this doctrine anymore. It has done its job. We can trash all the books, we don't need it anymore. But for as long as we're still with our atavisms, we're still holding strong to our pride and selfishness, we need to use those recommendations here to protect ourselves. And I do understand, believe me, that I wish it could be easier, but it's not easy. You just cannot make something complex easy, because you run the risk of commit very serious mistake. You know, brain surgery is not easy. You have to be extremely careful. Oh, it's just easy, just this and that. They're gonna kill everyone. Nephrology is not easy. If you don't know how to combine little sodiums and potassiums, you're gonna kill somebody. You can't make it simple. That's why, you know, in order to become a neurosurgeon or nephrologist, we spend some good 10 years of school bench plus another 7 years of residency to be able to do those things. And now somebody gonna write a book there, you know, nephrology for idiots. Only idiots will read it. And only idiots will accept themselves to be treated by such. Why would be different with the spirituals? Right?
Yeah, we would love to have the easy way out, right? Unfortunately, that's
We
not
do.
the.
And you can bring that to everywhere, right? From, I mean, why most people does not listen to, let's say, Beethoven? Because we did not elevate ourselves to be able to understand the complexity of the music. It's complex, extremely complex, right? And you see the degradation of the arts because of looking for the simple and easy.
Yeah. But again, in the end, it's a personal choice, right? You have to make your choices or where to choose. And a lot of people are being deceived and will continue to be deceived until humanity as a whole has upgraded itself to a better level.
Yeah, that's right. At the point that we are all morally elevated, then you don't need this doctrine anymore. They don't need to follow those recommendations anymore. You're not there yet.
And we won't be there for some centuries, I believe.
Yeah. And again, that's why this reading is extremely current for our now. It's not the time of Kardec, it's now. Okay, 307.
Yes, 307. Physical effects mediums belong to another category. Such effects are usually produced by low-order spirits with fewer scruples. This does not imply that these spirits are necessarily evil. However, a person may be simply a porter, but yet be very honest. Mediums of this type who desire to exploit their faculty could easily find a spirit to assist them without much hesitation. However, even in this case, there is a problem. Physical effect mediums, like those who provide intellectual communications, have received their ability for good purposes and not for their own personal satisfaction. If they abuse it, they can lose it or be harmed by it because, in reality, less evolved spirits are under the orders of highly evolved spirits. Little evolved spirits love to deceive, but they themselves do not like to be deceived. Even though they may spontaneously share in the games and caprices of curiosity because they enjoy amusing themselves, they dislike being exploited or serving as accomplices in money-making. Moreover, they are always providing they have their own will and that they act however and whenever it seems best to them, which renders physical effects mediums even less certain of the regularity of manifestations than writing mediums. Intending to produce them on certain days and at certain times would show profound ignorance. So what can they do to ensure money? Fraudulently stimulate the phenomenon. This is what some may resort to, not only those who accept such an occupation, but also even apparently simple individuals who think it is a much easier way to make a living than having to work for it. If an actual spirit doesn't produce anything, they make up for it in other ways. The imagination is very futile when it comes to making money. Since required payment is a legitimate motive for suspicion, that in itself is justification for strict examination, which should offend no one without justifying such suspicion. However, this suspicion is as legitimate in cases of payment as it is offensive in relation to honorable and disinterested individuals.
Now, the topic of the physical effects mediums, that is a category by itself that I like to talk about now and get it done with it, because nowadays we are not make much use of it. Nowadays, mediumship that of the intellectual phenomena that bring about books and messages are much more relevant and much more used in our doctrine. Not saying that the physical effect is completely eliminated and does not exist anymore. It still does, and it still has its value, but it's much more specific use of it. And just to clarify, physical effect is the one that the phenomena, the effect of the phenomena is observed by all present mediums and non-mediums, that it affects our physical senses. that affects our physical eyes, our physical ears, our physical nose. Mediums who possess that ability, they are able to provide specific substances or substance. The one that we usually refer to is called ectoplasm, that the spirits can utilize that substance to render things of spiritual nature to be seen, to be heard, to be smelled by all who are present in the environment. That's why it's physical, because it affects our physical senses. Okay? Kind of operations. You know, if there is a physical phenomenon of an operation in which the spirit materializes, renders itself visible to everyone. Everyone in that room will see that apparition, that spirit who covered him or herself with an element that is visible to everyone in the room. Okay, in this case, ectoplasm or anything of that nature, to bring roses from the spiritual world, to bring the smell of flowers from the spiritual world. All those things are physical phenomena, okay? Usually because the spirit needs to manipulate very dense matter, very gross matter. It's usually practiced by less evolved spirit, because that makes sure it doesn't mean they are evil, they are bad, they're just less evolved. Very often those spirits, when physical phenomena is done for the good, is done for help us here on earth, it's done by less evolved spirits under the guidance of more evolved spirits, because those more evolved spirits does not have, I'm sorry, they have a perispirit that is more ethereal, and they cannot easily manipulate those more dense, more gross substances. But the less evolved spirit have a more dense, a more materialized, so to say, perispirit, they can easier manipulate those substances. So the more evolved spirits you bring, those less evolved spirits with them, and the less evolved spirits will perform the physical phenomena when it's done properly. But when it's done, let's say, only for material gain, when it's done only as a means of show-ups, look at what I can do, so see of my extraordinary powers or supernatural powers, what I can do, more evolved spirits will not be taking part on those kind of phenomena. More evolved spirits will allow them to take place, or more evolved spirits will just plain curb those less evolved spirits to participate in that exhibitionism. They can do it. They can stop. There is a hierarchy. Kardec places over here. Okay, less evolved spirits are under the order of highly evolved ones. Okay, there is this hierarchy. If the more evolved spirits choose not to act and allow things to go, they have their own reasons, and will eventually lead to the good, lead to important lessons right then and there. But they could just say no more. The exhibitionism is over. We're not gonna allow you to use this faculty to impress others, to fool people. And then what's happened? The medium may say, okay, they close the door for me, I cannot use anymore, or they can say, hey, I still have to pay my mortgage, I still have to pay my bills. I find the ways of doing the performance by myself. I don't need the spirits. And Kardec plays over here. And when it's starting to make money, the imagination is very fertile when it comes to making money. We can always find a way to trickery. At the time of Kardec, he did a lot of studies and was able to find a lot of those charlatanism, a lot of those little tricks, document a lot of them. Can you imagine today with the technology that we have, illusionism that we have today, we can do a lot of stuff and trick people with the physical phenomena. But nowadays, especially in accordance to Spiritism, it's not using much. At one point, it was extremely important to call attention to their presence. Okay, we are here, and we can show to you that we are here. Come and see what we have to offer. And when we came to see what I have to offer, say, well, what we have to offer is of an intellectual, moral matter. We do not no longer need to use the physical phenomenon any longer, and they no longer use it, except in some very specific circumstances. That would be a topic for different discussion, of course. But to fool someone, if you want to make money of a physical phenomenon, even with the physical phenomenon, is even more relevant because it affects our senses. We see it, we hear it, we smell it, and if done to call our attention, if it's done to make us little puppets, it's a very good tool. And again, if we have mediums with the narcissism who seek to put themselves in a pedestal, there are mediums out there with the same kind of intentions. And again, it's a perfect marriage. But it's not that used that often anymore. Okay.
Yeah, we have to just remember that the physical phenomena still exists, right? It's still, we find out there is a lot of mediums of physical phenomena unaware that they are mediums, and physical phenomena happening. The haunted houses is a good example of physical phenomena still happening, right? But in terms of productive, we're talking about productive mediumship for the upgrade of humankind, as Elmo mentioned before. The physical phenomena is rarely used nowadays. It still exists, it's out there. There are a lot of physical phenomena still happening, but it's rarely used to call our attention for the upgrade of human society.
Yeah, and there is one more item of physical phenomena, so let's read on it. And again, it is important that you pay attention, that you know it, but it's not, most of us are not really participate on this physical phenomena on a regular basis, at least. 308.
Okay, 308. Even when restricted to physical manifestations, mediumship has not been granted for putting on shows. Those who think that spirits are under their orders for public exhibition may rightly be suspected of charlatanism or skillful sleight of hand. Let us always remember this when we see ads for spiritist or spiritualist sessions with paid admission. And remember, we will get when we're attending these shows. We will get when attending these shows. From everything we have said, we may conclude that absolute disinterestedness in profit is the best guarantee against charlatanism. For if it does not always ensure the veracity of intelligent communications, it at least deprives evil spirits of a powerful means of action and shuts the mouths of certain detractors.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think we covered some most all of it. And again, as Chico Xavier used to say, telephone rings from there to here, not from here to there. There is absolutely no mediumship without any spirit. And no spirit is a slave of a medium. It is true that the same way that spirits can deceive us for being intellectually better than others, the same way it happens the other way around, that there might be mediums out there who is intellectually more elevated than some spirits and find a way to control those spirits. Okay, that could happen as well. In the domains of mediumship, there is such a case that being studied. But in general, spirits are not forced to do anything. Okay, the spirits are not obliged to show up somewhere at the time that the medium wants. So only by having, and Kardec says over here, let us always remember this when you see ads for spiritist or spiritualist sessions with paid admission. I even open a parenthesis over here, spiritist ad with paid admission. That in itself is a really red flag, because it could not really be spiritist if it's with an ad for paid admission. And I have to open another parenthesis. There are events that is necessary to cover the cost. If you're going to have an event that 400 people is going to expect to show up, and you have to rent a room that is able to accommodate 400 people, it doesn't usually comes for free. There is a cost. And it's only fair to share that cost at a minimum with all those 400 people. So if you have an event, let's say, of Divaldo Pereira Franco come with Haroldo Dutra Dias, come from Brazil, and we expect that we're going to have 400 people, and have to rent a room that accommodates 400 people, and have to help those individuals who charge absolutely nothing, at least to cover the expense, at least the tickets to come here. It's only share that 400 people put a very small amount to cover all their expenses. This is not charging for the event, okay? That this is help everyone contributing for the event to be able to take place. A lot of people does not understand it, especially a lot of Brazilians who are used to go to every event in Brazil for free, not paying anything at all, not understanding that there are spirit centers in Brazil who are able to accommodate 400 people. You don't have that here. It's something to be considered, and I have to open that parenthesis. It's not that individuals are charging others for profit, just asking everyone to participate, to contribute for the event to be able to take place. It's a completely different thing. People ask why you charge for books. If the books are good for everyone, it does not come for the medium itself, or is the medium charged for it? The medium is not charging for it at all. The medium does not receive a penny from that at all. But in order to put books out there, publish books, to distribute books, so everyone may have access to it, there is a cost. And we only ask for a small participation of everyone to cover that cost. The same thing to use the internet. There is a cost, just ask everyone to participate, so everyone may have access to it. It's completely different, unfortunately, out of ignorance, out of our own selfishness. We often do not understand it, and we start to accuse spiritists, groups, events who put a lot of effort to have things available to everyone, accused of doing exactly what spiritism tells us not to do it. Are you guys there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Amo.
Oh, because I lost the image over here.
I'm over here. I hear you.
Okay, can you hear me, João?
Hmm.
Look like you lost João though.
Oh,
I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
okay.
Oh, he came back. Okay.
Yeah.
It disappeared momentaneously. Okay. Yeah, I think I went a little bit out of the topic over here, but when it comes to the topic of charge, it just came to my mind that there is some charging in spirituals, but it's not for profit. Okay. Again, the example that I always use is blood transfusion. If you want to participate, do a charity, was a very important one, and donate blood if I'm able to. You don't get a penny out of it. You may get a glass of juice, and I thank you very much. And the immense satisfaction and pride that you should have for contributing to bring health for many people at once. 1 pint of blood may help 4 or 5 people. It's a wonderful thing. It's a great charity for those who are able to do it. But all you get it again, maybe I get a glass of juice and I thank you very much. Now, if you yourself later need a blood transfusion, you're gonna get a bill for it. And say, is that fair? Yes, it is. You know, to receive that blood, the unit of blood, there was a huge cost. And what you're paying for it is just a small, tiny fraction of what takes to take the cost to take that takes to take blood from one vein and place in another, somebody else's arm's vein. Huge cost. Okay, only the bag that you put that blood in is a very special kind of plastic. We're not gonna go into details here, but they cost a lot more money than you could possibly imagine. And what the institutions do say, let everybody contribute at a minimum to the cost of having blood available for everyone who needs it. It's not a profit. And I think it's absolutely fair. And in spiritualism, we need to do the same thing. So in the spiritualist movement, there will be some occasions where there is a little cost. There you ask someone to participate to cover the cost of events, not trying to profit from anything, which is totally different.
Talking about cost, and Ivaldo, he announced that he's coming here March 23. He'll be in New York.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. He sent a message yesterday that he's coming. So, believe it or not, 94, almost 95 years old, and he's still doing the work. So yeah, we don't have details yet, but for sure we will have a place. And as Elmo said, a place has to be paid and we have to charge, right?
But Yeah, you have to ask everyone to contribute to cover the event. It's not
Yeah,
even to charge.
exactly. Yeah, he's not charging anything as usual. I think we should stop here, Emo. So because we finish a subject, so it's a good point to stop, right? We have 10 minutes left.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Just a reminder that we don't have meetings for the next 2 Sundays, right? Which is Christmas and New Year's. So we will be back on January 8th with the study of Liberation, the book Liberation. And we'll have our regular meetings this week, tomorrow, Tuesday and Thursday, and then we'll be closed until January 3rd. We'll reopen January 3rd. Okay.
Okay.
Carol, can you do our final prayer?
Is she saying?
Carol, we cannot hear you. I think she's.
I'm not on mute.
Yeah, I think we are having problems. So, Zoraida, can you do our final prayer, please?
Yes, absolutely. To our beloved Christ, our spiritual benefactors, our guardian angels, with our hearts full of peace and serenity, we thank you for allowing us here again today in the study of mediumship, allowing us to understand the importance of learning, putting into practice, and evolving through our studies. We thank you for the opportunity. May we take all that have been given to us today in our hearts to grow and understand. We pray, dear Father, for the starting of our Christmas holidays. We ask for peace and serenity, especially for those that are in so much need. Through the wars, the suffering in hospitals and hospices, homeless, the undeveloped countries that are going through so much. We pray for their peace and serenity, dear Lord. And we thank you for all that you have given us, for we are so blessed. May we take it with us as we leave here today and continue in our homes with prayers and faith in our hearts that we are always, always protected and guided. May the rest of the week be able to join again and continue through our prayers, enlightening our hearts, our lives in both worlds, the spiritual world and the physical world. We thank you, dear Lord. And we ask as we leave here today to continue with our prayers and dedication to what our Father has given us. So much knowledge in order to progress and continue in a life of peace, serenity, love, and charity. We thank you, dear Lord, and we ask as we leave here today, return again and be able to brighten our lives with all that we have been given here today. Thank you, dear Lord, and with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting today. So be it.